about the city and picnic, and we wanted to offer you an escape from the city for 30 minutes into nature. And we're now floating in nature. Yeah, it's very close to the city, and it's a very special, sorry, I will just sit back. Then we can see something. And it's a very special ecosystem here. What I want to share with you. There's a connection between the ports of Shanghai, port of Singapore, port of Seattle, and all ports, big ports in the world, through these guys, the ships that lose their water here in this part where we're floating right now. And that brings something with it. It brings life, great tasting immigrants, the American lobster, and it also brings millions of beautiful creatures that are now just underneath us. There's a few million of these jellyfish floating around, and they came in with the salty water of the sea ships. So we're in nature now, and we're not only about nature, of course, and I want to share you a few things with you. We're in the floating city of Amsterdam, which is built on water, and it's flowing. We have something with nature because I work as a strategist with an internet agency called Evident, and we have some of our clients who are focused on nature, and that's the Forest Council, Staatsbosbeheer here, and we did some stuff with them. I want to spend about 5 minutes on things we've done, and then we'll switch over to the things that you do and think about, because we have 3 great guests on board with us. Follow the Fox was an initiative to do a real live show on a fox family in a natural area in the north of Holland. What we did was create a website that shared the whole thing happening with the fox family giving birth to 6 young live on the web using underground cameras. There were 2.2 million visitors who experienced this. And this is the live sound of foxes giving birth, and you could follow it with the streaming cam. Sounds human, isn't it? So we tried to bring nature into people's homes, and it worked. Lots of guys were following this very closely and discussing about it, bringing in the discussion on nature and how to preserve it, because we don't have real nature left in this country. It's parks, and we call it nature, and they look like nature, but it's parks. So, but then we brought all the people inside their homes to follow the foxes, and then we said, okay, let's give them a tool to get out again. And we built an iPhone app that shares all the natural areas around you, and it's very easy. You just say, okay, I want to travel for 15 minutes or for 30 minutes, and then you're outside. We show you where to go and where to access nature around you. So then we had 25,000 downloads of the iPhone app, and it's not very handy for all people from abroad, but it's very handy to use it in this country, of course. Okay, we're not only about nature, of course. Almost 5 years ago, Herbert, is it 5 years ago?
Yeah.
We were working on a project using social media and using the online domain to create your own neighborhood, and that's more on topic, of course, in the urban future theme of picnic. Create your own neighborhood. People were asked to give their needs and wants about their own neighborhood, and an artist's impression was rendered live. Then they could choose their own space, the space they would need, and plot it on a new area to be developed in an area near Almere, the city of Almere. They could discuss online about the position of their homes and say, okay, your garden, or I'm looking into your kitchen, and we did also plotting a 3D rendering on Google Earth, and we provided offline sessions to discuss what was happening online. So it was not an online community, but also offline. So much about Evident. We're making the step here to our 3 nice guests. I would like to welcome Oliver Medvedik, co-founder of Gen Space and Bioworks Institute. Maybe you can clap for all of them.
Yeah!
And Mitchell Joachim, co-founder of both Planetary One and Terraform One. Yo, Mitchell. And Rob Carlson, principal at Biodesic.
Yes, okay.
And which I could accompany yesterday on the boat that was lying next to the one we took off from for a very nice session, workshop. Okay, I want to kick off with this statement, and I wanted to invite you to open the discussion on what you do. Tell us something about what you do, and what keeps you busy. I call it algebra and mushroom art. Mush and room to create architecture or to create art. And algebra is about the discussion we had yesterday about bringing the word out about algae and renewable energy or other materials, high-tech materials, and telling about it, bridging it to the educational context. So that was one of the topics that was yesterday in the session. So maybe Rob, you can open with that. Tell me something about you.
This mic?
Yeah.
So I'm from Seattle, and I spend most of my time thinking about how biology is becoming more involved in our economy and how we're relying more on biology to build things, to make things, not just food, but also chemicals and materials and fuels. And this year to Picnic, I brought the idea that maybe we can make more of the things we use in cities instead of transporting them from far away. That biology, new biological technologies would be the medium for that manufacturing, for that biomanufacturing.
Great. And yesterday we discussed the need of education to bring this very high-tech message, but that's also very practical and economical to young and older people. And what openings do you see on that topic?
Well, it's not a new idea to try to reduce the imports into cities or reduce the waste using ecosystems in some way, but I think it is new that the technologies are finally here. We could actually build something today, and I'm not sure enough people understand that this is something we can embark on today and actually transform our cities, transform the way we spend money, which is of course how all of this stuff gets to us. So instead of sending our money far away to foreign countries to get petroleum or get food or something like that, we can make many of these things locally. And I think involving people with that activity, so there are jobs to be had in cities to do this sort of thing. There are ways to bring kids in to learn about biology, to learn about technologies in new ways, and if they see the world around them, the materials around them being made in front of them instead of just magically appearing on store shelves, then I think we'll also have a different understanding of the way we build our world and hopefully the way we also throw things away, so that we throw less away.
Yeah, we talked about using waste to create energy yesterday, of course, and clean water also. I liked very much the example of using the aquarium or a very small amount of water to create your own algae. And maybe you can tell a little bit about the use of spirulina. I don't know if it's your immediate area, but that was called the very accessible sort of algae to use.
Right. So spirulina is a nutrient. It's a good thing to eat. It turns out it's very easy to grow. It can also purify water. You can recycle the water to grow more spirulina. The idea more generally is that by including algae into urban ecosystems, we could clean up water and then grow that algae to use as feedstock for other systems. So we might eat that algae, or we might feed that algae to other systems that then make or replacements for petrochemicals or make other materials. So rather than disposing of organic wastes as we do now and just kind of putting them into the water and hoping they get far away, we can keep them close and use them as resources. And that technology is here today. It's not magical, it's not science fiction, it's economical, in fact. The whole point is you can make money doing that, and you can make more money doing that than you can from petroleum. So it's a matter of time before begins to replace petroleum before these kinds of technologies move into our economy, but we could embrace them faster just by getting the word out more.
Great, great. I'm going to switch to Mitchell and Joachim. You're doing something great today, later on. Maybe it's nice to tell a little bit about it, and it's containing the mushroom that you see here. This is not a picture of Mars, but it's the surface of the fungus you're using today. I don't know if you recognize it, but maybe you can tell a little bit about what you're doing and what the workshop this day will be about.
Yeah, sure. We actually work on ideas about nature in the city. We actually don't see a difference between nature or city. So I think that's crucial to understand. And nature as a term is often misused. In fact, it's almost it's not accurate enough, I think, to kind of put in place for the kind of work that we do. In general, I think about living architecture, living places that are much different than the previous notions that we've had. For instance, like organic architecture and Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright and a lot of previous architects have been talking about we must dwell in tune with nature, that there must be a kind of a deeper connection with its functionality, and they would produce these glass and steel buildings that would have adornment or some kind of decoration that was supposed to be mimicking nature. And it wasn't actually kind of a truly composite form comprised of materials that were ecological, which is a term that actually we like to use. So when we think about a new type of architecture, a living architecture, it's extruding from processes that we understand fairly well in science and using them for built environment purposes. So something like mycelium is a product that you can make rather easily and has properties that are allowable for making building envelopes, building walls, possibly structural components, certainly shading devices, acoustic tiles, these kinds of things. So we show how you can do this in a very simple, off-the-shelf fashion that is not only useful for our world, but also for the developing nations. So we kind of rethink living architecture in general in terms about what it means to dwell with an ecology, not exactly a nature in the city.
Great, great. And Oliver, maybe you can introduce yourself and maybe tell what you're doing.
Hi, yeah, so I collaborate on a number of projects with Mitch, including the Mushroom Workshop, which we're going to be holding later this afternoon. I'm a co-founder of GenSpace, which is a community biology laboratory. So it's basically a community laboratory where we offer lessons to the general public, basically anybody who wants to learn about genetic engineering. And we offer workshops. I have a PhD in molecular biology, so anybody who wants to essentially learn the tools and technology that is basically driving today's economy and will only expand as the years go by, we offer these workshops to essentially anybody off the street. We've taught a number of individuals from the ages of 13 to perhaps, I'd say, 55, 60. People come from a wide variety of backgrounds. We do community outreach programs. We go to schools. We teach and lecture about biotechnology, and all of our stuff is very hands-on, so people actually learn the tools and apply them. You can make, glowing bacteria that smells like bananas, for example.
Great.
We also offer the space as a microbiotech incubator. So for a very small fee, basically based on a gym membership model, if you have a small project that you'd like to work on, you can come into the space and basically utilize it. We don't take any intellectual property. All your ideas are your own. You can come in and basically, in a safe environment, we have a biosafety level 1 laboratory, which means we work with safe, non-pathogenic organisms.
Yep.
Anybody can come in and essentially work on their project, and come up with the next best thing that's going to save the world.
Great.
So that's essentially where I spend most of my time. It's in Brooklyn, by the way, so if anybody wants to stop by, we're on 33 Flatbush Avenue, come on board. We'll give you a lesson in genetic engineering.
Great, great. So you're doing a lot of education. Are you working together with Rob to get Rob's story out?
I'd like to, but currently I'm not.
I'm working to get their story out, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're doing it the other way around.
Yeah.
Is there a topic that you really discuss a lot that you disagree on? Because I'm curious, you're doing about the same thing. So where does it is the friction in your vision?
So you're looking for controversy right now.
Yeah, of course.
Don't look for me. Don't look at me. I'm actually very happy with what they're doing. So
Okay.
Yeah, we love each other.
Yeah, in this case, yeah.
No, but yesterday in the session, of course, it was mentioned. Okay, how do you look towards genetic modification, or because that in the public opinion that can be something, it's scary, and especially growing crops or doing something with food. So maybe that's a topic. How do you respond to the skepsis of the public?
Well, the first thing to say is that in the United States, biotechnology is very big business. Its revenues from genetically modified systems are $300 billion a year, more than $300 billion a year at this point. It's more than 2% of our GDP. It's growing very rapidly, probably faster than anything except Facebook in the United States. If that's real value, I don't know.
But that's genetically modified.
That's genetically modified stuff. So that's drugs and crops and industrial products. There's no prescription that people ought to adopt that other places. It's an experiment we're doing in the U.S. in some sense. So we're relying on genetically modified crops. We're eating them every day. And it isn't clear that that's the right thing to do in the long run. There are some benefits in the field. So you have a higher yield, you use less water often, you use fewer pesticides, you use less diesel fuel for plowing and whatnot. But I'm certainly not prescribing that as a solution, but it is being adopted very rapidly around the world. So whether it's China or Africa or South America, people are planting more and more crops. It appears to be safe, but we don't know yet.
Yeah. Because yesterday we also experienced that species are influencing each other in the dome setting, and that's a sort of science where there's a lot of knowledge lacking of the exact influences of species between each other.
So one of the speakers we had yesterday was talking about a Dutch project to grow all the food for a city in a greenhouse. Not the greenhouse that the Dutch are famous for, which are monocultures of peppers or tomatoes or just flowers, but rather polycultures, so many species living together. And the productivity of a system like that is higher than a monoculture, whether it's in a dome or whether it's in nature. And these are things we're just beginning to learn about. So for years we've been taught that bigger is necessarily better, but it turns out that smaller and more diverse can be even better than bigger and monoculture. And then if you start to add genetically modified systems to this mix, all of a sudden we're doing even more experimentation, and we really don't understand yet how all this works. It seems like a good idea. We might discover that we need to backtrack a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm curious, of course, because we work in the online domain. I'm curious about how you use online communications in your line of business, because you have this great space where you can come in and what communication means do you use in your area, Mitchell?
Well, I got a genetically modified kind of, I guess, direction that I want to take it in, but I'll answer that first. We're in a very large building called the Metropolitan Exchange, and it's 7 stories of a 21st century Bauhaus, where you have people doing molecular cell biology next to artists, who are next to people who are working in confectionery, next to lawyers, next to people who are mechanical engineers, next to architects, all in this kind of place that's under this umbrella of thinking about our future economy and our future environment. So our communication linkages are direct, and I think there's nothing that can replace face-to-face kind of interaction. That works the best. And if you want to learn something about another discipline, if you want to truly understand what an architect is doing and understand what a biologist is doing, it's probably best to build a laboratory that's both doing biology and architecture in the exact same place, and have communication as much as possible in the same room. So I think we're very good at doing that, putting people together in a kind of a focus group that breaks down walls.
Yeah. So it's and you work together with all these different disciplines on the projects.
Yeah, we have a visceral understanding of what goes on in a biology lab, so that we can follow through each particular set of problems and understand them, so that we can make better designs for everyone else. And I think that's very unique. There's very few people in the entire world that we know of that are even doing something like that. Not only having a community biolab to basically explain to others how to do acts in biology, but also to work professionally on that level, I think is essential.
Yeah, great. Maybe there's a question from the audience, because you heard my voice long enough, probably. Jonathan, Marks.
How do you capture the story that you're collecting there? to reinvent the wheel, or that you're also making sure that the knowledge that you gain is also captured and stored?
It's a good question. So how do we capture the knowledge and how do we kind of disseminate that? I think, well, the internet certainly helps as creating a kind of wall of basic knowledge that we can understand. These are the things that are out there. And what we do is we find a question, which is a missing brick in that wall, and that becomes a research project. And that gets a little bit quiet because as we develop the research, we're really not sure. In fact, we make a lot of mistakes, and that's not something that people really want to hear. Eventually, though, when we produce something that's worthwhile, develop a strong thesis, we're able to build it up in a set of spheres through the internet to communicate that. We have multiple websites and blogs that appeal to different voices. So there'd be GenSpace clearly appeals to the bio community, while Terraform's website appeals to the larger design community. Is one very specific answer, and we also give people the ability to kind of come out and criticize it. So, or help develop the research. I think we actually welcome that because it's very helpful to find comments that lead us in a new direction, something beyond the boundaries of our particular laboratory that we have already. So I think that's exactly pretty much what we do. We essentially challenge the world to say, hey, look what we're doing. What do you think about it? Do I like it? Do I hate it? And then, is there some other direction you might want to put us in?
I'm just also curious about the algae you were talking about. Do they have a practical value, or is it? I mean, you mentioned the algae that smell a bit like bananas.
Oh, you're talking about the bacteria, yeah.
Sorry, bacteria.
Yeah, well, this is so that particular experiment actually came from a competition which is organized every year called the International Genetically Engineered Machines Competition, which takes place at MIT. Involves over 100 universities. It's basically an undergraduate level genetic engineering science fair, science competition that's focus is on synthetic biology. And by synthetic biology, I mean essentially engineering genetic pathways in organisms to have them do novel functions. And one of the novel functions in this project from 2006 was to get bacteria producing a small chemical compound called isoamyl acetate, which is essentially what gives bananas their banana smell. So this is basically a trivial demonstration of this technology, but currently right now and in the future, as the years go by, it's going to be very, very important having these biological systems producing valuable small molecules. So this is basically a demonstrator of how this technology functions, how these genes are inserted into organisms, how these pathways interact with one another. So it's a useful teaching tool.
Yeah. Will there be a moment, just to project from smell to farther future, that you could create the full banana without growing it?
Full banana without growing. Well, you could essentially clone the tissues right now. I mean, you have tissue engineering, which is another realm of biotechnology, which is essentially taking cells from an organism and growing them on biodegradable scaffolds ex vivo, and essentially recapitulating organs, and other systems. I would probably think for a banana, it's probably more practical just to grow the banana as a banana than to re-engineer the banana on a biodegradable scaffold. Although, as a technical challenge, I'm sure somebody would want to tackle that.
Yeah. With beans? Do you do it with beans?
With what? Beans?
Beans, yeah.
Oh, meat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. You can. Well, I mean, right now that's the most medically relevant application for tissue engineering. One of the slides that I'm showing recently. A few months ago, an artificial trachea was implanted into a patient. It wasn't entirely artificial. It was essentially a biodegradable scaffolding material that was three-dimensionally printed from an MRI scan of the patient. The trachea was removed because the patient unfortunately had a aggressive form of cancer, and then stem cells from the patient's bone marrow were harvested, seeded into this trachea, grown, and essentially you had a quote-unquote artificial trachea that was essentially rebuilt from the patient's own tissues and implanted back into the patient. The patient so far is doing fine from what I can gather from news reports, so that's a powerful application of tissue engineering.
I think that's a good question. Why would you want to regrow the banana if you could. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at is a new form of living architecture, where today we go out into forests and we bring some very heavy power tools and machinery, and we cut down loads and loads of trees. We use a lot of energy to bring them back to a mill, which reduces them to components, building components and elements that are usable, that get delivered on trucks again to a site and are assembled by workers into a home. And all of this kind of product comes from a tree. We're thinking about using the tree without any kind of modification. There's no need, and shaping it slightly torturous, but maybe gentle, into volumes that are absolutely structural for human occupation and use. And this is absolutely no genetic modification. The only problem is that it does take some time to grow a home and connect it in this particular fashion, and you could use genetic modification to increase the speed of tree growth to do that. But there's no reason to do it. You can just be patient and wait for something like this to happen and grow an entire village for thousands and thousands of families without remaking the tree.
Right. Yeah, I think we're getting in the direction of the picnic area again. I have one more question for all three of you. It's about what's next and what's not far away, but what's close. What's the next thing you'd like to achieve and you're not able to right now? Maybe start with Rob. Simple question.
Simple question, yeah. So, I mean, I have many things I'd like to do. I've been working for a long time to try to develop some technologies in my own laboratory to get those out into the world, and I'd like to get that accomplished, right? So there's a sort of personal effort to build some things and get them done, but more broadly, as I was mentioning earlier, it's now possible to use biological technologies in our society, in our economy, to do things that previously we've been using sort of fire and mining and big heavy industry to do. And I'd like to start building some things. I would really like to start putting some technologies together and demonstrate that we can use biology to produce things that we use every day within our cities or as components of larger manufacturing efforts, and that we don't have to spend a lot of money to import oil from far away or whatnot. So that's the challenge for me right now. I would really like to assemble some working systems.
Bring it into people's homes.
Or even into the cities to start with. Just bring jobs back to cities, bring production back to cities, and demonstrate that these things are functional.
Great, thanks. Oliver. The next thing.
So the next thing for me would be in a very similar vein. I'd like to see some of these tools become more accessible, more cheaply accessible to individuals. Particularly, our focus is on education. So the biotechnology revolution has been going on for quite a number of decades right now, since the early 70s. And I'd like to see a lot of these tools, which are used in biotech corporations and other large institutes, basically trickle down more into the high school and the middle school classroom levels, and having kids at an earlier age being introduced to these forms of technology, which hopefully will be driving our society more and more, not just now but in the near future.
Great, thanks. Mitchell.
I think I would like to see everything that we use, every industrial design product, in some level, rethought completely and grown. I'd like to see people grow their cars, grow their clothes, and grow their houses. And to do that, I think we need to bring biology and ecology to the desktop of designers. Not only should they have a visceral understanding of the basic mechanics, but should be able to use it as one of many tools that they've been using to help make this real.
Great. Thanks a lot. Are there any more questions from the audience? Something you'd really like to know?
Can I just make one comment?
Of course.
I think in a sense it's almost like what we're doing right now, it's sort of like a back to the future kind of thing, because humanity has always been using the biological world as a resource, and it's only we think when we think this as being really new, it's really using the resources of petrochemicals that's really new, that's very recent. Before that, everybody relied on biological systems. So for one example that I was just looking up, we use plastics that are synthetic from petrochemicals to make buttons. Buttons used to be made out of casein, milk protein. So it's basically cross-linked milk protein, and and it looks and feels just like a plastic button made out of petrochemicals. So in a sense, we're sort of going back to that rediscovering this technology that we've always utilized and may have been just sidetracked momentarily by the advent of big oil. And now with the tools at our disposal for molecular biology, hopefully we'll see a flowering of this technology that we've always had at our disposal.
Great.
What role is Europe playing in this mini revolution, as it were? I mean, compared to are you in the States way ahead?
Well, way ahead in terms of revenues, yes. So the U.S. has embraced genetically modified crops in a way that Europe hasn't. We'll see if Europe maintains the stance that it has, or whether it feels like it needs to remain with unmodified crops. There are economic reasons you might begin to embrace genetically modified crops, especially for animal feed, sooner rather than later. But again, that's a decision that will be made by the population. But otherwise, genetically modified drugs and industrial products, Europe is pushing pretty hard, and there are many teams from Europe in this iGEM competition at MIT every year, and this year's the first year that iGEM has become first regional, and then we'll have an international final at MIT, and there are 50 teams from around Europe in the iGEM competition, and I think teams from Europe have won maybe 6 or 7 out of the 8 or 9 competitions that we've had. So Europe is there. It's unclear whether things will be commercialized as fast here as they are elsewhere. That's a decision that you will make.
Great, great. I see we're entering the harbor of Picnic City again. So I would like to thank you for being on board. I think we have to give him a big round of applause, bringing all this knowledge and information. So Oliver, thank you.
Thank you.
Rob,
Thank you.
Thank you very
thanks
much.
a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks everybody.
And one thank for Captain interviewing Garcia.
Thank you.